when Normal started working this thesis project, he was focused on timing recovery in ultra-wideband in the presence of multipath and multi-user environments. And that was an interesting problem by itself. But then the work expanded to include differential detection in these multipath, multi-user environments, differential detection combined with the timing recovery, and then studying the trade-off between the allowable bit rate and the number of interfering users, and then comparing that trade-off with the ideal case of a perfect but hard to obtain rake receiver. So it turned out to be a very interesting project, and I think we learned a lot from it, and I certainly enjoyed advising Nirmal in this work, which then I'll tell you about in great detail. Nirmal?
Thank you, Professor. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the defense of my master's dissertation on performance of a self-correlating synchronization and detection scheme for impulse radio UWB in a multi-user, multipath environment. Ultra-wideband technology is an upcoming technology with unique potential for high data rate, short-range wireless systems. FCC opened a huge bandwidth offering unlicensed UWB, the use of UWB in an unlicensed band at noise floor. The bandwidth offered was 7.5 gigahertz from 3.1 to 10.6 gigahertz. The interest in UWB is due to a lot of advantages it offers. For example, the low power spectral density, allowing it to coexist with narrowband systems, high resolvability in multipath environments, low power, low cost receiver structures, and better, better penetration through obstacles, allowing it to be used in wireless personal area networks, primarily in indoor short-range environments, and precision imaging, navigation, and radar. Ultra-wideband signals can be either carrier modulated, which use analog carriers of 500 to 800 megahertz wide bandwidth to modulate the baseband pulses, and use multiple access through OFDM or multiband frequency hopping. Or it can be impulse radio, which is the original form of UWB, where we use ultra short pulses with very high bandwidth for transmission, and multiple access can be either through direct sequence spreading or time hopping UWB. Our focus is completely on the time hopping UWB, wherein we have a symbol divided into multiple frames, and there is one pulse in each frame with a very low duty cycle, and that in a particular frame, the pulse could be time hopped among NC chips, and the symbol is consisted of NF frames actually. So giving a spreading factor of NC times NF, which is quite large for a time hopping UWB. The data modulation is using primarily a two-level pulse amplitude modulation. There are multiple challenges in UWB time hop UWB systems. First one we talk about is the channel modeling, which consists of modeling the indoor dense multipath channels accurately. The standard model consists of a variation of the famous indoor model, which is the Saleh-Valenzuela model. The other challenges are pulse shaping, which should satisfy the spectral mask and bandwidth requirements of the FCC, and distortion-free antenna design, which is important because of the narrow width of the pulses. The primary focus of this thesis is on the timing recovery problem, which is basically fast and accurate detection of the starting position of the receipt symbol, and the difficulty in which is accentuated by the low duty cycle and the dense multipath and multi-user interference.
So, I don't know if you said this in your previous program, I missed it. You said it. So what is the range for these systems that you're looking at?
Primarily less than 30 meters actually, and the data rates are higher if we go closer. We can obtain up to 480 megabits per second at probably 4 meters, and it goes up to 110 Mbps at 30 meters. Timing recovery, one important class of timing recovery problems is timing based on dirty templates, wherein I mean, which is based on the fact that the time hopping pattern in two consecutive symbols is similar. So there is a high amount of correlation between consecutive symbols, and the correlation for the timing acquisition can be obtained. I mean, we can use templates derived from the received signal, and that's why it's called dirty templates, because it's corrupted by multi-user interference as well as noise. The figure actually shows the autocorrelation, the time varying autocorrelation obtained by using two windows from the received signal. The received signal is delayed by a particular amount and autocorrelated with the delayed version, and we obtain the time varying autocorrelation, which basically reaches a peak at every start of the symbol actually. And the noisy curve, I mean the green curve is actually in the absence of MUI or thermal noise for just a single user, and in the presence of MUI and thermal noise, the curve actually gets noisy and the peak is shifted from the regular position, which is the start of the symbol. Thus a timing error is incurred. The existing
So therefore, are you now sort of saying that this is like over several symbols? Is that sort of how I look at it? Or?
yeah, this is one symbol time.
Okay.
So at the start of every symbol there is a peak in autocorrelation, because we obtain, I mean the correlation is maximum when we go from symbol to symbol, and that peak is shifted because of the presence of other pulses, I mean pulses from other users or thermal noise. Existing TDT algorithms or timing based on dirty templates.
Also, one more question.
Sure.
So you put an SNR number there. So what is the average power that they are sort of using for these systems, and what is the peak power?
It's
So you're using these pulse.
yeah, it's usually in the milliwatts range.
So the average power is in milliwatts range?
Yeah.
Or less.
Yeah, or
Less than a kilowatt. The peak could be that times whatever the spreading factor is.
yeah. TDT algorithms could be either training based, where a judiciously chosen training sequence is used only for the acquisition phase at the start of every communication. It could be the standard training sequence used is 1100, 1100, etc. But there is no signal template involved here at the receiver. The training sequence is transmitted every time the communication is started, and acquisition, the training based on dirty templates is obtained using that training sequence alone. The use of the training sequence actually causes a effective bit rate to reduce, because it's the number of effective data symbols transmitted is lesser, but it's faster than the other scheme, which is the blind TDT, wherein the dirty templates are nothing but the data symbols transmitted. There is no training sequence involved here, and thus the effective bit rate is higher than the training based TDT. Again here, for an accurate timing, the autocorrelation obtained could be averaged over multiple symbols and then peak picked, so that the effective timing error is averaged out, and the probability of higher timing error is reduced drastically. The use of multiple symbols for averaging the autocorrelation causes slower acquisition compared to the training based schemes. Our focus is on the TDT algorithms, and particularly on the blind TDT algorithms. Yang and Giannikis proposed a blind TDT scheme with a symbol long windows used for autocorrelation. They basically proposed the received signal is delayed by a symbol time and autocorrelated with itself, and then the autocorrelation is continued over a symbol time and peak picked. The disadvantage of this scheme is that it is independent of the time hopping code used, because from a symbol to symbol the time hopping code does not vary. It is the same every symbol. So that independence of time hopping code causes it to perform poorly in the multi-user scenarios, because it could actually acquire the timing of any user in the background or a jamming signal, because a jamming signal does not require the knowledge of the time hopping code. to overcome the difficulties of the scheme proposed by Yang and Giannakis, Shishir Agrawal proposed a novel blind TTT scheme, which we call the Agrawal Blind Synchronization Scheme, or the ABS scheme. Here, the time hopping code, the acquisition is made dependent on the time hopping code by using half symbol long correlation windows instead of a symbol long correlation window. Within a symbol, the time hopping code design consists of a user offset, which we call the delta. The second half, the code is designed in such a way that the second half of the TH code is shifted compared to the first half by the delta. So it's the same code in the first half and the second half of the symbol, just that the offsets in the second half in the time hopping code is delta more than the corresponding frame in the first half. Also, this delta is unique to each user and thus allowing unique decorrelation of the desired user in a multi-user environment.
So J is the index of the frame.
J is the index of the frame, yeah.
Delta should have an index into the user, right?
Yes, actually. C is the time hopping value actually for the jth frame and for the jth frame actually. It's not user specific. This is just for an illustration.
So where was this published? I can find it in your citation. It just says this person's name and this scheme.
I don't think it was published.
It's a master's thesis. Shishir wrote it.
Okay, so the citation is missing in the.
It's
It's
missing.
incomplete. Yeah, it seems like your whole thesis is based on this, and that's actually.
No, I've actually mentioned that as a thesis, so it's.
No, but it doesn't even say anything. Go look at least the version you gave me. Go look at reference 41. I think that's what this is. And so I was like,
It doesn't give a line that says,
it just says his name and it says a novel algorithm for blind acquisition of ultra wideband signals.
did you ever submit a TR technical report?
No.
So there should be some, because if you look at the citation right now, it doesn't say anything.
Yeah, that's you should say.
Okay, look at it.
Does it have his name?
It has his name, but then it sort of doesn't give you any information. Look at number 41.
So, is it too late to make it a TR? Oh.
It's never really
You didn't-
TR.
You need to put in master's thesis, Rutgers University.
Okay.
That's fine. Master's thesis is fine. It's just that,
Okay, I'll include that.
Yeah. So this was a student who did a thesis with you or with him?
With Larry.
Ah, okay. All right. So you should, yeah.
You were not worried. So every user has a different sequence of popping patterns.
Yes. Actually, I'll talk more about that.
So it was Larry's thesis and it's supervised
Yes.
by Larry?
Mhm.
All right. Then I suggest you should change the name to AGBS. It's fair.
I think ABS is fine.
AGBS is good. No, I'm serious. I'm not joking.
All right.
So there's proper attribution. That's good.
But it really was Shishir's idea.
It's okay.
Thanks for the thought.
Yeah.
How about GABS?
Yeah, that would be
Gaps.
better. Actually. Right. So, okay. Go on.
The received sequence here is a composite signal where I represent Sj of k as the data sequence of the jth user, and j could vary from 1 to nu, where nu is the number of users in the system. It's a composite signal of, I have not considered multipath clutter here. It's a composite signal of all the user signals and the thermal noise. And we note that each of the user signals is merged with the received the desired user signal with a random phase delay, which we represent as T dj. The system parameters used are 24 frames per symbol, which is NF, and 100 chips per frame, which is NC. So the spreading factor is basically 24 times 100. The code offset used for the desired user is 1 nanosecond, and the chip time is 1 nanosecond again. So basically the code offset assigned to each the desired user is one chip for the time hopping code design, and the number of users we varied from 5 to 25, although more number of users are definitely can be accommodated at the cost of increasing the spreading gain and thus lowering the bit rate. But we basically show that even with 25 users significant degradations are seen, so we have limited the number to 25. SNR values we have tested from 5 to 25, and the number of symbols used for acquisition, which is M, we have taken 4 values, which is 2, 4, 8 and 16. Here is an example of the transmitted symbol for one user without any multipath or multi-user clutter and no thermal noise. We see that the time hopping pattern is actually the same compared to comparing the two halves of the symbol, except that there is an extra offset in each of the frames corresponding to the first half. So that offset is nothing but the design offset assigned to that user. At the receiver, the process for timing acquisition is to delay the received signal by half a symbol time, and then an offset delayed by the offset, which is delta, and autocorrelate. This will yield a maximum in autocorrelation when the pulses from in the two windows of correlation belong to the same symbol, which is possible only at the start of the symbol. So when we peak pick the autocorrelation over symbol time, we can estimate the timing error according to where we started. So it was shown by Shishir Agrawal that the performance similar to the training based scheme can be obtained in the ABA scheme for a single user, and 4 times improvement in acquisition schemes over the acquisition speeds over the existing blind TDT scheme proposed by Yang and Giannikis for the same synchronization accuracy and BER. The scheme is independent of the polarity of the data sequence as well as the time hopping code. With the careful choice of delta, NC and TC, we can actually accommodate up to NC minus 1 users, and that could be up to 99. The use of differential schemes for acquisition and detection lowers the receiver complexity greatly, and the scheme is more resistant to jamming and false timing acquisitions of other user signals. The challenges we faced were to evaluate the ABS scheme in the presence of multi-user and multiple users in a multipath environment, evaluate the effect of the time hopping code, the code pattern actually, and to find a model to represent the multipath multi-user interference, to find the improvements which could be possible in reducing the timing error with multiple symbols used for acquisition, and finally to analyze the BER performance of non-coherent differential detection using the ABS scheme for timing. And also we came up with the important question whether timing errors obtained after using the ABS scheme affect the detection schemes, which are coherent and non-coherent schemes in the same way or different ways. One primary factor we considered was the time hopping pattern. The 4 kinds of time hopping patterns were analyzed. The first one is uniform same time hopping, wherein each user gets the same time hopping pattern and there is no randomness in the time hopping from frame to frame. All the time hops in each frame is the same. The second scheme is random same time hopping, wherein from frame to frame the time hops are randomized, but all the users get the same time hopping code. The third one is random different time hopping, wherein again the time hopping pattern is randomized and each user gets a different time hopping code. And the fourth one, we introduced amplitude modulation with the random different time hopping. A point to note is that even here the users are separated by the code offsets which are assigned to them. So that is unique, and thus they don't exactly have the same time hopping code, but they just have the time hopping pattern which is similar. And the second half of each user is separated by the user delta assigned to them.
Is it the same time hopping for each user for resolving time synchronization. That's what you're saying by same time hopping.
When I say
The delta is same.
no, the delta is different, but the time hopping, there is the time hopping code is basically a random set of integers, which is uniform from 0 to nc, which is the number of chips.
Just the phase is different.
Uh,
The same.
Actually, they have the same time hopping code. The only difference being the deltas in the second half of their codes. So basically, the first half of their codes will be the same for all the users, and the second half will be shifted by the corresponding user
Are they
deltas.
synchronized?
They're not synchronized.
The users are not synchronized.
No.
But they have the same coding.
Yeah, coding scheme. The coding pattern is same, but they're still separated by a random and unique delta assigned to them.
And they arrive at random times.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they don't arrive the same.
But you know, which is almost the same because random time just means random phase.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's a pseudo-random sequence. How long, well, you'll tell us how long the codes are.
Yeah, the codes are NF long, where NF is the number of frames, which is 24 in this case. We estimated the standard deviation of the timing error in each of these cases by generating multiple users with different codes, and we found the best time hopping code pattern, which is the random different with AM time hopping, because it gives you the minimal mean square error or the standard deviation of absolute timing error. We see from here that the uniform time hopping has the maximum standard deviation, whereas the random different time hopping with amplitude modulation has the least, with increasing number of users. So we concluded that amplitude modulation should be used with a random different time hopping pattern. Basically, there are three different degrees of separation between users. One is the randomness in the time hopping. The second one, each user gets a different code. And the third one is the user delta, which is unique to each user. So there are three different separations of.
By the second one, you mean the amplitude modulation? It's different for each user?
Yeah, the AM code is different for each user as well, and it's randomized. But the AM code repeats. The difference is the AM code repeats every half symbol, but the TH code repeats every symbol. Since we use in the autocorrelation we use half symbol long windows, the pulses have to align themselves when in the same amplitude to get maximum correlation. So we randomize the AM code every half symbol.
So AM code is just the code, it's not the AM modulation, right?
No, it's not the data modulation.
Binary, plus one, minus
Well,
one.
that's the AM code, that's
Yeah.
what you mean by AM code.
Okay, so but it's all plus one, and it's not like some. It's still plus one and minus one.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
It's like the ternary code which,
Yeah.
so when you have AM code, it's like a ternary sequence with maybe timing, with also, it's like two sort of like spreading waves, one wave spreading in sequences,
Mhm.
plus minus once, and the other way in time.
Time,
right?
yep.
And you could have like different AM modulation and different time modulation.
Yes.
So two different sort of
Spreading.
sequences, like a two-dimensional sequence.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Did anybody propose that before?
No, actually, till now they've used only random different time hopping in the
And
existing
most of
schemes.
the WB literature that I've seen, it's unipolar. They don't
You
use
like-
that extra degree of randomization.
Right. I mean, I've seen people doing two plus minus ones, but they're like fixed, it's always plus one, minus
Yeah.
one, plus one, minus
Yeah.
one. But I don't remember ever seeing that they combine, essentially, what you seem to combine is direct sequence.
Mhm.
You combine, you have both direct sequence and
And
hopping.
time hopping actually.
And, just understanding that, if it's not published, that's a paper.
And you can see it does improve over the others. You get an additional benefit from that.
Right.
Randomization.
The autocorrelation variable here for timing acquisition consists of, since we use discrete pulses, it consists of pulses from the first half symbol here, SI1 and SI2 denote the pulses from the first half, the two half symbols of each symbol, the windows actually. So this is window 1 and that is window 2. If we notice, we get a signal component which lines up completely when I mean this is maximum when pulses in the two windows are both from the same symbol. That is when the synchronization starts at the start of the symbol. And we get an interference and noise component which consists of a summation of interfering pulses as well as noise terms over a half of a symbol, and also product of I1 and I2 summed over half a symbol actually. So we have to model the sum of the interference pulses in each frame, as well as the sum of the product of interfering pulses due to two different windows. So differential acquisition yields sum and product of the desired user signal with the interfering pulses, as well as the cross terms and the product of two interfering terms. We actually model the sum of the interference as a random variable and plotted the normality curves. Here, since the scale is not linear, we get a straight line for when the variable is Gaussian. So we notice that even for 10 users in the symbol, the sum of the interfering pulses in a frame is pretty much Gaussian. So, and as the number of users increase, the variance of the random variable increases, but it becomes more Gaussian. The same is true for the product of interfering pulses in consecutive symbols, and this is
What do you say becomes Gaussian?
actually more if it is close, when more points are close to the straight line, it tends to be more Gaussian actually. Now we can actually see more points lie on the straight line here and compared to 10 user case, but even for 10 users.
Yeah, it's at the extremes that you can see the departure from straight line.
Oh, okay, yeah. So that's what I was wondering. Like, do you really like this is maybe all in the main lobe, right? What if like really, to see the Gaussianity, you look at the tails, right?
Yeah.
And here it's hard to see the tails because we just go to 10 -4.
Right. All of them are very straight line between, let's say, 0.002 and 0.998. And then as you go beyond that into the further tails, I think you're right, it's not that obvious that 50 is much better than 10, but I think it's at least somewhat better. The departure for that light blue curve is a little bit less than the departure for the black curve.
The same is true for the product of the interfering pulses in the two windows summed over a frame, and we assume that both these terms are individually Gaussian even for 10 users. So we found out in each frame the sum of interference and the sum of the product of interfering pulses in the two windows are individually Gaussian, and so the summation in the previous slides over half a symbol time, or even for differential detection we get it for a symbol time, both of them tend to be Gaussian because the sum of the Gaussian random variables is Gaussian again. When we add additive white Gaussian noise to it, it's again the sum is again Gaussian, and this Gaussian model strengthens in a multipath environment where we have components from the multipath clutter in each chip, and by central limit theorem, more the number of samples in that sum, the variable tends to be more Gaussian. So we assume that in each chip, the sum of the noise, the multipath clutter, as well as the multi-user interference is approximately Gaussian, and we use this Gaussian approximation through the rest of the simulations as well as analysis. Another interesting thing we noticed with the differential schemes is something called the self-raking. The multipath profile of each pulse is similar from frame to frame, and thus when we do a differential sort of acquisition or detection, the multipath patterns in the two windows actually reinforce each other, thus aiding in the capture of multipath energy. This process is what we call the self-raking, and it actually is true for both the user pulses as well as the interference pulses. Both of them, the multipath components for both of them tend to reinforce, and the significant capture of multipath energy. We got this idea from the ABS scheme, which seemed to be independent of any kind of channel model used, and when we analyzed the differential methods, we found the process of self-raking, and thus it is pretty much independent of any channel model used in a multipath environment.
You say self-raking, you just say that, if you do this shift, you get most components.
They line up in multiple
Right,
places.
you call it self-raking.
Yeah.
To obtain the timing performance of the ABS scheme, we conducted a set of simulations, generated random time hopping code and with amplitude modulation and an IID data sequence for the desired user.
Somehow, when you do self-raking and you look at the sequence, right, then it's really important to have these autocorrelation properties of the sequence very, very good, right? To really have little cross factors between paths.
Right.
So that's where,
Yeah.
the fact that you have plus minus one,
Yeah,
so
right,
the fact
right.
that you have the delays,
Gives you- right.
that can give you a really nice
Right.
analysis.
Yeah. That's why the timing looks better when you have that additional randomness,
Right.
because it makes the autocorrelation better. But fortuitously, it also makes it more correct to use a Gaussian model,
Right.
and therefore makes analysis much more tractable.
Yeah.
So for each chip we generate a Gaussian random variable representing the sum of the multi-user interference, the multipath components as well as the thermal noise. The variance again depends on the SINR, which is a function of SNR and NU. And starting with a random portion in the first symbol, we acquire the autocorrelation over a symbol period with half symbol long windows according to the ABS timing scheme, and we compute the maximum of the autocorrelations obtained, which should ideally be at the start of the symbol, but we get a timing error due to the multi-user interference and the noise. So we estimate the timing error and plot the cumulative distribution functions for different system parameters and compare them. This chart shows the CDFs of absolute timing error, which could vary from 0 to 1200 nanoseconds, which is half the symbol. We have taken m equals 2, which is 2 symbols for acquisition, and SNR of 5 dB, and we have varied NU from 5 to 25. We notice that for 5 users, even for the worst conditions, the timing error with ABS scheme could be limited to 2 frames, which is 200 nanoseconds, and this gets worse as the number of users increase. And for 25 users, even timing errors close to half a symbol are possible actually.
So if I use the pilot-based scheme, where would that be?
I haven't compared that for the multi-user environment actually, because there is no analysis in literature for multi-user application.
The reason I'm asking is this: we're talking about ultra-wideband. Ostensibly, the bandwidth is huge, so much spectrum. So why do we care about blind schemes? Or at least we have to say something. I know you said that Shishir did his thesis. He said blind gave you performance that is as good as a pilot-based scheme. That was what I understand is for a single user case.
Yes.
For a fairly benign environment. So when you go to an environment like this, okay, so I think you need to sort of have some benchmarking of what the pilot-based scheme does. because my first thing when I started reading is, okay, blind schemes make sense
Mhm.
when the pilot overhead is sort of prohibitive.
Oh, yeah.
I can see
Mhm.
that, for instance, if somebody is saying MIMO,
Mhm.
right, you could spend about 50% of your, you know, the symbols on basically training and understanding
Yeah.
what the
Mhm.
channel is. There, I think something like that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
But in this case, we're talking about bandwidth that is so huge,
Mhm.
right? And so it was not clear to me sort of why, if the performance is comparable,
Mhm.
wonderful, no problem.
Yep.
And I'm also saying if you go for differential schemes, that's also good, you're
Mhm.
reducing complexity. But I think I was looking for a benchmark of what a pilot-based scheme did here. And you could do a simulation with the same modeling, you assume the same kinds of models, that is, all the multiple axis interference, product terms, everything is Gaussian, that's perfectly okay.
Mhm.
I think you can still come up with some kind of
Comparison.
like a similar curve for that.
You know, simple analysis of the.
I think so, because otherwise, it was not clear what how to really sort of read this.
I mean, what the benefit of was
Right.
avoiding the.
Right. I mean, when you made the remark of, the previous thesis said
Mhm.
it's comparable, that's fine.
Okay.
Maybe something, to say like, how much better is it? Because you're saying as the number of users get larger,
Mhm.
things are getting pretty bad soon.
Yeah.
So I want to sort of understand what is a pilot-based scheme doing, right? If it's also doing something similar, then fine. I mean, surely would rather do this than that.
Later on, he's going to show some results for the ideal case.
Okay, then we'll see how far away it is.
And then you're going to see that the trade-off of bit rate and number of users that you can tolerate is quite different using differential detection, using the angular case. Anything else is going to be somewhere in between. And his results are going to show how much room there is in between two.
And also, this is actually the worst case when only two symbols are, the autocorrelation is averaged only over two symbols, and SNR is 5 dB. We notice that when M increases, it actually gets better. Let me show you here.
So when you say timing error is 2 frames, what do you mean by that?
I mean, we estimate that the start of the symbol is from the second frame rather than the actual start of the symbol. So we don't start at the exact start of the symbol of the received signal.
Frames in a symbol.
So
So when he says 2 frames, he's saying like it's like
two pulses are missing from his
Yeah.
window, his integration. And they may come from the previous frame, which is opposite polarity. From the
You would
previous
think
symbol.
that there's some notion of ambiguity versus fine tracking.
Ambiguity in.
Some frame resolution or symbol resolution. Well, symbol
It
resolution.
would be simple. I mean, if you start not at 0 but at 2400, then really you're synchronizing to the next symbol. And so you start your data from there.
I mean, as the timing error increases, the amount of energy we get in the data detection scheme for relevant decision is reduced. So this chart actually shows with SNR of 25. We notice that there's not much, there's no significant improvement in the timing error distributions when the SNR is increased from 5 to 25 dB. So as M is increased from 2 to 16, the timing errors can be drastically reduced, and you notice that even with 25 users at 25 dB, the maximum timing error could be less than somewhere close to 4 frames actually. So with the higher values of M, we can still reduce the timing errors incurred using ABS scheme.
So you're going to show how this affects detection.
Yeah, I'm going to show that. Again, this is the effect of M on the timing error distributions. As M increases from 2 to 16, we can see that the timing errors reduce, even for a worst case of NU is 25 and SNR of 5 dB. So by increasing M to values of 32 and 64, we can actually further reduce the timing errors incurred, but that will be at the cost of acquisition speed, because we need more symbols for averaging out the autocorrelation. We consider a differential detector for the receiver structure, wherein the received signal is delayed divided by a symbol time and multiplied with itself, then averaged out and sampled at symbol rate to find the decision variable. We use the Gaussian model for interference and thermal noise, and we by analysis we found the BER conditioned on the absolute timing error, and averaged that conditional BER with the PDFs of timing error obtained through simulation. We also made the interference from symbol to symbol independent by proposing a small change in the the transmission scheme, basically, with additional offset of delta, a plus delta or a minus delta to alternate symbols, thus making
To understand better your results earlier, you do always do acquisition, which means you have a fixed delay. There's no drift in your timing.
no.
No drift in timing. And how many symbols did you say that? How many symbols do you go for to acquire?
Yeah, that depends on the value of m that is fixed, and that could be dynamic actually, because in better SNR and lower user conditions, we can actually adapt to a lower value of m.
These curves you fix.
Actually, yeah, this one is this one varies the value of m actually.
M is the number of symbols.
Symbols, and as m, if m of 2 is used, we get a higher probability of timing, larger timing errors.
Is that M?
Yeah, this is m actually.
So 0.2, 4, 8, and 16 symbols.
Yeah, as the value of m is increased from 2, 4, 8, and 16, the value of the absolute timing errors actually reduces, since we are averaging the autocorrelation over multiple symbols.
So if you needed that light blue curve as your performance, which is going to show you really don't need for differential detection, but if you needed that much accuracy or that good a CDF, you'd have to use 16 symbols.
This is with 25 users and the frame is 24. What? The sequence of length is 24.
24, but 100 chips per frame.
So it's 100 nanoseconds times 24
Positions per frame, 100 chips per frame.
per frame.
And each one of them has a lot of multipath. So the users, and with their
So when you say
multipath-
one symbol over 24 frames, you mean like 1 bit over 24?
Yeah,
So you have 24 times 100 chips per bit.
per bit.
yeah,
So what's the rate? If you use the, whatever,
well,
1 nanosecond.
it would be 1 gigahertz divided by
NFNC, which is 2400.
because your 24 pulses per symbol are really just 1 bit.
So how much is that? 10 to the 9 divided by
4
24.
megabits or 4
It's like 400 kilobits.
400 kilobits.
He's going to relax this assumption later and show the
So I think it's
trade-off.
about 40.
You can shrink the spreading factor and get a higher bit rate, but then you have less robustness against the interference.
Right. So one essential parameter is how much energy per symbol do you really use for estimation, right? And then m, when you increase m, then how much energy you use for timing.
M is just the number of symbols that he's averaging his autocorrelation over to compute the timing.
Right. Yeah. So that affects the overall energy that's used for estimation.
It affects the accuracy.
The total energy.
It affects your bit error rate, but it doesn't. So in that sense, it can't affect how much energy you need to get a certain performance. But you would design this independent of what M you're going to use.
Again, we computed the decision variable with timing error of n chips. The total number of chips is NCNF. So when we have a timing error of n chips, this is the desired portion of the signal which can be used for detection, and this is the undesired portion wherein there are pulses contributed from the product of the next consecutive symbols. That's because of the timing error. We evaluated the BER conditioned on the timing error n, which is BER n as the sum of two Q functions. We see that there is a huge dependence of BER on NU square, a square term of NU, and thus the major player in the degradation of the BER is actually NU, as we'll see in the curves. Even without timing error, when the small n is 0, we see that as the number of users increase from 5 to 25, this is for 5 users and this is for 25, the bit error rate drastically reduces even below 10 per minus 2. This is using differential detection. And with 16 symbols, there's not much improvement, but since it's already degraded, with 16 symbols, we get a similar performance to the no timing error case. This curve actually shows the effect of M on the BER. We see that the dotted line is actually the no timing error case, and the green line is M equals the timing error with M equals 2. So the BER performance gets better and better as M is increased from 2 to 16, and the black curve is M equals 16, which performs close to the timing error, no timing error case.
I'm not sure if you explained that you took that bit error rate formula, which is conditioned on n, and then averaged it over your empirical. Just repeat it so
yeah.
everybody understands how you got these curves.
Yeah, we actually found the conditional BER conditioned on the timing error n, and we found the PDFs of the timing error using the simulations, and we used those PDFs to average this conditional BER, and the charts actually show the average BER over for different timing errors. So we see that with m equals 16, the BER performance is pretty much close to the no timing error case, with differential detection, the BER performance is dominated by NU and not the timing error itself. So ABS scheme with 16 symbols just prevents further degradation of BER after so much degradation due to NU.
So this is so why is the the perfect case so having such a error for?
Why is it so bad?
Yeah.
Go back to the BER curve. This is not coherent, so you're adding up a lot of noise in your integrate dump detector.
I mean the interference.
The formula.
The noise floor actually consists of product of interfering pulses as well, along with sum of pulses in each frame. So there is a higher dependence of NU compared to the coherent scheme, which will.
So why doesn't that is not divided by some sort of spreading gain? It is.
The spreading gain is actually for the SNR, and actually this is a simplified expression. We actually do get the spreading gain for multi-user interference as well.
I mean, that NU seems to be there by itself. It's not
But
affected.
the spreading gain is in the numerator, in the signal part.
NCNF is the spreading gain.
It's like any other spread stuff. Your SNR or your SINR is proportional to the spreading gain.
So NC is what is it?
NC is the number of chips per frame, and NF is the number of frames per symbol, or frames per bit.
You get square.
Well, you get squared because you're doing differential detection. If he wasn't doing that, he would just get NU in the denominator, the first term, point to number. And he'll show that later for the ideal rate receiver, where you're not doing differential detection. But when you do differential detection, you get an additional penalty because you're adding up noise by noise in so many frames, in so many chips. And that gives you the NU squared term.
From here we can actually notice that this sum will yield a product of I1 and II2. Similarly, other product terms as well. So we're not just adding interference, but we're adding product of interfering pulses, and thus the squared dependence of on NU. This curve shows the average BER over SNR over the number of users. We see that as NU, or the number of users, increase from 5 to 25, there is a drastic degradation in bit error rate, and there's not much improvement when M is increased from 2, 4, 8 and 16. The effect of timing error is dominated by the number of interference. So even with M equals 16, significant, we just avoid further degradation of BER after it's degraded by NU. To compare it with the coherent detection schemes, we did the same analysis, a conditional BER over timing error for the rake receiver, where we use a noiseless template. This is an ideal rake receiver, so we use a noiseless template for each of the multipath components, and with timing error we basically get the decision variable, which constitutes of the desired decision part and extra pulses from other symbols due to the timing error. And here we notice that there is no product of interfering pulses in the two windows used. So the dependence on NU is lower compared to the differential detection scheme. Again, we found the conditional BER conditioned on the value of the absolute timing error. We averaged this BER to find the average BER using the PDFs of timing error obtained by simulation.
When you computed this, like you had some cross correlation term between users, right? And you assume that's like an M sequence kind of pseudo noise.
Cross correlation.
We assume it's Gaussian.
Yeah. But
But there's still a cross correlation number, right?
Right, I think the variance now. And puts variance.
Yeah, that variance is dependent on the number of users present. So
No, I know, but you assume some cross correlation between users.
yeah, that is also Gaussian. That was also modeled as Gaussian. So we,
But what's the variance?
that variance is dependent on the SINR, which is a function of NU as well as SNR actually. So we take that into consideration in the variance of that Gaussian variable.
You're thinking that when you have two users and they're multiplying each other in this differential process, there might be some cross correlation between them.
That's what you assume, otherwise you wouldn't find anything.
Yeah, well, what you
It would be zero, right?
right, what he's assuming is that the average product is zero because they're coming in at different phases with different time patterns.
And amplitude modulation.
They
Right, but
have different data.
Right, but then he assumes some variance.
Yes, right. That's what goes into that formula.
Right, so to compute the variance, you assume some cross correlation.
No, he assumes no cross correlation, so the variance is just the average of the squares. Yeah, the average of the individual squared values. It's like noise, two independent noise terms. The variance is the product of their individual variances. And that's what he's assuming for the signal as well as the thermal noise.
We see that, here the values of BER in the analysis are, the charts shown are low because of a high spreading factor used. We use NC times NF, which is 2400, and just 25 users. That much spreading is not required for an ideal rake receiver. So for practical purpose, this is like an ideal case. So for practical rake receivers, we may actually get a lower or a higher BER. We notice that as the effect of timing error is significant here, since for M equals 2, the degradation factor from the no timing case is high, and that could be drastically reduced by increasing the value of M to 16, which is the black curve, and that is closer to the no timing case.
I would like to revisit what you
that you can assume that.
Well, that you can assume that the sum is ghosted, but it seems the way you assumed it is that each user is ghosted, which is not exactly.
No.
He's not assuming. I mean, if he had enough multipath components, maybe you could do that, but he's not assuming that.
I'll look at.
Again, when we increase the number of users, the previous curve was for NU equals 15, and when we increase the number of users to 25, there is further degradations in BER, and higher values of M could be required to match the performance of the rake receiver with no timing error. Also, again here we notice that the dominant factor becomes NU as even for an ideal rake receiver, though the effect of timing error could be significantly reduced using the ABS scheme.
I'm not sure what to make of any of these curves, right? Why are you operating in a regime where your spreading factor is so high?
The problem was the timing error simulations done.
I'm saying in this, if you're saying you made something from 10 to the minus 10 to 10 to the minus 15.
No, the issue was we used the timing error simulations in the spreading gain of 2400, and when we did this analysis.
No, I know you chose a number, but I'm just saying it seems like these problems all go away when you have such a. I mean, you've done something, right? And you're saying that even with your schemes, even the two symbols, you're doing a 10 to the minus. Let's take an SNR of like even 7 dB. You're like already at 10 to the minus 10 BER. I'm saying there's no need to do anything else.
This curve is just to show the effect of the timing error on the ideal rake receiver. It's not
where timing error is real. I mean, this is a curve, right? Where when it's sort of saying like, oh, I made it, from 10 to the minus 10 to 10 to the minus, the best thing you can do is 10 to the minus 15 or something. And I'm saying you should show this in a regime where, and not only that, by doing such a high spreading factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So isn't your now data rate like about 400 kilobits per second?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
You wouldn't do that.
right. So I would say.
But he didn't have the simulation results for, this was like late in the game. He just wanted to show that when you go to a
Yeah,
coherent
so I would suggest you go to like, your peak data rate, what was it? 4 megabits per second or some
Mhm.
number, right? And so let's look at all these numbers where,
Okay.
these errors actually mean something. Right now, I don't think these errors mean anything
Okay.
because they're non-existent. I mean, you have such good spreading factors, right?
Yeah.
And so clearly, these problems go away.
Yeah, we can actually resimulate the timing error with a low spreading gain for the rake receivers.
Right. So, something like that, right? Because it was not clear to me, is the UWB system are people sort of really thinking about using it in the context of 400 kilobits per second? Is that sort of what you're
No.
looking at? Or is the use something else? I thought it was really short range and sort of much higher data rates.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right or wrong?
Yeah, that's right.
So therefore, I think,
It depends. I mean, it can be short range and multi-user and low data.
yeah, so keep the multi-user, that's fine. So all I'm saying is, these numbers would sort of,
Right. To do it more thoroughly, he would have to reduce the spreading factor.
Right.
For the, right, but he didn't have, this was like a late-breaking
Okay.
result, just to demonstrate that the effect of timing error might be more significant in an ideal receiver than it is in a differential receiver.
sure.
So it demonstrates it, but it doesn't show the actual numbers that you want to see.
Again, the chart shows the average PER as the number of users increase. We see that the timing error actually, the curves are spread apart, basically showing greater improvement from m equals 2 to m equals 16 as compared to the previous chart shown for differential detection, where the spread was not much. I can revisit that. Here we see there is not much improvement in BER obtained from by using m equals 16. Whereas the effect of timing error can be drastically reduced by using ABS scheme with m equals 16 in an ideal rake receiver scenario. Again, the use of ideal rake receiver comes with the benefit of higher data rate because of the dependence of the rate per bandwidth ratio on NU. We see that for differential detection, the dependence is a squared NU term which has a further degradation in rate compared to the rake receiver, which is 1 over NU times SNR of 0. SNR 0 is nothing but SINR of 0 is nothing but the SINR at infinite SNR and a fixed BER of 10 power minus 2. For those values, we see a trade-off between rate and simplicity of receiver detection. Receiver structure. There is a huge trade-off compared to the differential detector for the rake receiver. Higher data rates are possible using the ideal rake receiver, whereas it comes, a receiver structure for differential detection comes at the cost of lower data rates. As a summary of contributions, we have studied the ABS timing scheme in a multi-user, multi-path environment, defined different approaches to time hopping pattern design, and computed the mean square error versus SNR for each of those, and identified the best scheme as random different time hopping with amplitude modulation. We demonstrated that in a dense multi-path, multi-user environment, the noise plus interference term in each chip can be modeled as Gaussian. We simulated the timing errors for the best time hopping design using the Gaussian model of interference and obtained the CDF of timing errors over different conditions in system parameters. We postulated a differential detection scheme that provides self-raking with a user-specific alternate symbol time offset for making the interference terms in two consecutive symbols independent. We also derived a simple expression for BER conditioned on timing error based on the Gaussian interference plus noise model, and we averaged the conditional BER obtained through analysis using the simulation results of timing error. Finally, we compare the bit rate and bit rate versus the number of interferers for both the coherent and non-coherent ways of detection, showing the trade-off between receiver simplicity to the data rates achievable using the receiver.
So your coherent detection was based on the assumption that you know exactly the shape of the multipath, etc.
Yes.
How do you estimate?
It's the best you could ever do, if you could determine that multipath profile perfectly.
Yeah, and so what sort of I'm concluding from your thesis, right, is that in UWB, it seems like none of these problems really exist. The real problem is actually building it. Because essentially, if you can really sort of synthesize, these really narrow pulses, right, and even if they sort of are not accurate, the fact that they are narrow enough, and you have enough of them, we can spread, and you have these wide bandwidths. It seems like basically it's saying that all the problems that we used to sort of worry about in the context of like a CDMA with some limited bandwidth or something sort of go away.
Well, one of the main
Or at least they're
problem goes
diminished,
away.
greatly diminished.
Fading goes away. Fading goes away. But you have this wide dispersion relative to your symbol, your pulse width. This wide dispersion of multipath, where you lose a lot of energy unless you can find a way of collecting it.
That's okay, but you're doing pretty well with this non-coherent differential scheme, right?
But at a cost in the data rate.
And the BER
Well,
actually.
if you look at the total throughput, NU times the bit rate,
Right.
it's not a nice fraction of the total spreading factor like CDMA.
Right,
Yeah,
they
but-
even assume like 1 nanosecond.
Yeah, but then
and
the
they
que-
don't get, like, they would like to get like
Yeah,
a
so-
video through,
No, no, no,
and in 5 meters, they really don't get even close to that.
Right.
So I thought if you went to 5 meters, you can do like about 4 megabits. Is that what you said?
Actually, theoretically, we can go up to 480 megabits per second. In literature, that's
So
Maybe, well, even if you could get 4, that's 1/25th of the bandwidth.
mhm.
I mean, CDMA gets more like a factor of 1/4.
yeah, but I'm saying the fact that you have so much bandwidth here, it's not clear in spectral efficiency is so relevant anymore. When you sort of give somebody a 30 megahertz channel and a 30 kilohertz channel and say, look, use this as efficiently as you can, it's wonderful. Yes, all the things that we used to care about, going back to Shannon, right? All that makes sort of really want to be spectrally efficient. But the moment you sort of open it up and say you have so much bandwidth, I'm saying
That's why getting that low an efficiency or spectral efficiency is acceptable.
Right, right. Right, so it seems like, that's what my point is, I think it seems like it's all about really building it. So that comes to my next question, right? What is the state of the art in UWB implementation? What's out there? What do people do? And how does this sort of relate to what somebody has built or tried to build or some system that's out there?
Uh,
Yeah,
It's hard to answer because I don't think
I'm-
people are building WB stuff these days.
So then
In
the
the-
question is, because I was looking at your, first of all, it's a very nice collection of sort of literature that you've done, right? Yeah, so I was reading it and then I saw these papers which are UWB, what is it? A scheme whose time has come. And this is a paper in 2004 by Giannakis, and I'm wondering, like in 2007, where are we with it now?
Maybe it's time is gone.
Time is gone.
Who knows? I mean,
So I was just trying to put everything in perspective. I have not worked in this area, right? So
you know what happened when they tried to they tried to standardize an air interface for UWB? They came down to two competing candidates, and they, in the commercial area, they were both carrier-based. This was baseband.
yeah.
And they couldn't agree on the standard, so they just didn't standardize it. And I don't know if that,
they didn't kill it, I think they just decided to do two different things.
So now, so is there a system that is out there that does UWB?
I think they're building.
yeah.
And so my question is then, how does all this relate to that? What do they do? Do they do differential schemes? Do they do coherent schemes? Do they do?
We're not
binary
aware
schemes?
actually.
this is baseband, which is
I know,
the
this
way
is-
the military works.
No, this is the more when sort of the Bob showed
Yeah,
us.
right, right.
No, I understand that.
Well, you could ask yourself, what is the extreme spectrum kind of detection schemes, because they do
Mhm.
impulse spike based.
Yep.
Like artillery sequence. So what you're doing without maybe time shifting, or maybe with time shifting.
Mhm.
I don't know what they do for detection.
And I could collect more information about groups which are working on UWB.
Yeah, I think something,
As far as I know, Mesut was going to Intel, and he was doing some measurements of 802.11 and UWB interference. It seems like there's some company in Israel which makes these systems.
What, a baseband type UWB or?
I don't think it's
I think these guys, what's her name? Our student used to work there. Former student. What's his name?
Your brain, your shrink.
Shrenik. And they were doing the impulse radio type of stuff.
Yeah, he went to time domain, or whatever they
Time
split
domain.
I
off.
think they split.
Yeah, and then he went to Texas with the part of it that was in Texas.
Right.
think
So,
it's
and I think
split,
they
but-
were doing this stuff.
Yeah.
No,
So-
yeah, in the whatever he went first, but then he went to the other group, which
Oh, I
did
see.
the MBO.
Oh, okay.
I think they split between military and commercial, which was basically baseband and carrier based. And I forget which half he won.
I think what they realized is that, the MB group realized that let's go back to the standard old technology, like let's just do hopping over this huge band. Sort of narrow band, which is 5 times bigger.
Yeah, right, narrow.
It's sort of like optical channels, right?
Mhm.
Nobody cared about spectral efficiency in
Yeah.
optical channels.
It's a huge
Because
bandwidth.
The channel is so wide band. I mean, for instance, there were these information theorists who sort of said, oh, let's try to write papers on this, right?
Yeah.
Then they realized it's quite futile because there is so much bandwidth available, right? And so therefore, how spectrally efficient you are becomes sort of less of an issue. And
But he's not really studying the spectrum.
no, I know he's not. So I'm just saying, it seems like all the issues are in terms of how you practically do this.
Yeah.
As opposed to any, whether you do coherent, non-coherent, it seems like the hits you take. Because the assumption is that you're working with spreading factors that are pretty high.
Well, what he identified was the large space between the simple differential approach and the ideal approach, which is really kind of unattainable. So he has a suggested future work that sort of says it would be nice to
Yeah,
find more
so
practical
again, I had a
solutions.
question about that. Is it really large?
Yeah.
You call that large?
Yeah. In fact, those two curves he showed were the space between, he didn't show the ratio because maybe go back just a few slides to the comparison
But
curve.
the thing is, like, if you have this use curve for a number of users, then that goes up. Think about 15 users is 15 squared. versus 50,
Yeah.
in terms of this.
I mean, we'll look at those two formulas on the right.
Which is if you fix
So-
the forest density, it's
Yeah, so I
effectively
see it
the
as like a,
variance.
I see it like a factor of 4, a factor of 5. Right?
Where do you get that?
Oh, I'm just going from 0.01 to 0.04, that's how I should read it? Suppose let's say 10 users.
Yeah.
I thought the number is like roughly around 0.01 to about 0.04.
Well, that's more than 4 to 1.
We'll make it 5 to 1.
Look at 5 users, it's the difference
It's
between
hard to
0.01
see,
and
you should have a lot
0.075.
of scale.
It's like about 6 or 7 there, right? 7. Let's say 7.
Yeah.
So I'm just again asking the same question in terms of when you have so much bandwidth. So is a factor of 7 in spectral efficiency as big a deal as it was when we had like a narrow,
Right.
Then the FCC said, okay, here is your cellular system, go build it in this. Then, yeah, we really sort of think about it, but here it's not clear to me whether that's also
Well,
relevant.
there are different advantages to being able to do better. One is that if you really don't care that much, but you can do better spectral efficiency, you can make your pulses wider and therefore easier to generate and detect and sample. Or if you want to really accommodate a large population or a population with very high throughputs, then you want to get, so there are various motives for doing it.
So therefore-
But you pay a cost of simplicity. And
Sure, no, that part is fine.
Actually, you see,
that's why we want
the rate ratio is in NU, the
Yeah.
larger NU, the more ratios.
Yeah.
If you have 15 users, you get a 15 ratio, so if you want to do 15,
And also this is for a particular,
I thought that is, those ratios are exactly what is plotted here, is it not?
yeah.
Yeah, that's
I
right.
think
So then-
you
So
should.
take 15 users, I think you're talking like a factor of what, 10?
15.
15?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, if NU squared is the dominant term,
Mhm.
then it's, the ratio is NU.
it's 2 plus NU actually.
So for 20 users, it's a 20 to 1 difference in efficiency. And at some point, it starts to bite. You don't
So I'd be
need that
curious to
big
see
of a-
what again is a relevant number for the UWB. For these implementations, right? Are they
Mhm.
talking about a system where there are like 20 users that you care about, or like?
I think what it matters is
Okay.
like if you have it at home, right, and you want to do video, then it tells you that you really cannot do whatever they said. Well, you can do any large number of
So-
UWB
so-
systems. You can do just
So how
a few.
many video wireless channels you're gonna have at home?
Right, that's what he should tell us.
I mean, they could,
I can tell you right now, it's not 20.
no, there could be
Really
a,
not 20, I mean.
Yeah.
So, and you're talking about sort of, at those ranges, at those rates, I think you're talking about ranges that are fairly small,
Yeah,
right? How many devices are you gonna have that are doing these rates in that?
Well, at home is one thing, Starbucks is another.
Yeah.
Or
So
student
High rise,
lounge.
high rise, you
When
should see
people
high
are
rise.
downloading files.
Yeah, but it's still not within 5 meters per second.
High rise.
They're not
New York
within.
City.
I mean, this is like a classic info station thing, right? It sort of says, if you sort of have these high data rates and you have to do it within a certain range, then there are only so many people who can get in that range. I mean, it's
I agree.
yeah, I mean, you can't have 15 people crowding into a 5 meter space and sort of
Well,
saying.
I mean-
then they sort of say, well, maybe we should
So-
have like 5 computers and get
So
rid of the
therefore,
wires.
I'm sort of really thinking that these days, this whole literature I saw on this UWB, I still couldn't figure out what the connection to reality was.
Keep in mind another thing that he didn't say here, but it's in the thesis.
Yeah.
His NU, the number of interference, it's an effective number. It's the total interference power divided by the signal
Right,
power.
right, right. No, I
And therefore,
know
he has
what
just a few users, but they're stronger, NU goes up even though the number of people doesn't, so. But in any case, he's just trying to quantify these relationships and not solve the problem for particular.
I mean, at some point they were talking, let's get rid of all the wires, right? So that means that you have 3 computers.
I think they talked about that with several technologies before. So I don't know what happened to that.
What technology?
Well, they were talking about Bluetooth.
Oh, yeah.
And they were doing that.
Well,
I'm
yeah.
sure its time came and went, I suppose. So, you know what, this has nothing to do with this. I'd be really curious to see sort of what the state of the art in UWB is right now. In terms of what have they built and where are they using it and what kind of systems are they talking about.
Okay, ICUWB
I think it might be a
2007.
good exercise to actually write a paragraph. on
Okay.
this.
I was actually searching for companies which make
Right.
UWB
No,
devices,
it's not
but
easy to find the information.
no, it's,
I'm sure.
Go back to your punchline. the last slide, because it addresses part of this issue of what might be useful. The next one.
Yeah, actually, since there's a huge trade-off between self-raking differential detection as well as the ideal versus the ideal rake receiver, in the extremes of simplicity of receiver design versus the allowable bit rate which can be obtained, the best trade-off may lie in between them. For example, a rake receiver with a local references for the 3 strongest multipath components, and that could perform definitely worse than an ideal rake receiver, but much better than the differential scheme.
Maybe better. I mean, not, depends.
Yeah.
In a strong multipath environment, maybe 3 taps isn't going to be
Not
enough to
enough.
capture the energy, and you do worse.
That's an example again, and there could be any number of receivers working in between that particular range. So future work should definitely consider those possibilities and test the ABS scheme with those. I mean, the ABS scheme is definitely the best available timing scheme present right now. The blind TDD schemes. So future work should definitely test the ABS scheme with such receivers. And we've also not considered the existing blind TDD schemes, the multi-user capabilities of the existing schemes. Even though we know one limitation of the existing scheme being independent of the timing error, and thus a greater chance of false detection or false timing of a different user in the background. Future work should definitely compare the existing multi-user capabilities of the existing blind schemes with the ABS scheme. So, any questions?